Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Your Mark on the World show. I'm your host, Devin Thorpe, and I'm a contributor at Forbes covering social entrepreneurship and impact investing. Our guests today are Dr. Sever of the Rotary International Polio Plus Committee and also Dr. Joffrey of the World Health Organization. We're talking today about polio eradication. Dr. Sever, Dr. Joffrey, thank you very much for joining us today. We're so glad to have you.
Pleasure to be
here. Dr. Sever, let's start with you for just a minute. Why don't you give us a little bit of a background on the history of polio eradication and Rotary and its partners, the World Health Organization and others?
Well, Rotary got involved with polio eradication, polio immunization in 1979. And has been supporting that and actively involved with that effort to reach the final goal of eradication of polio throughout the world. And along with that, we've been working, of course, very closely with the World Health Organization and with the UNICEF and with the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and other organizations and the governments of the world in this effort to complete the eradication. So it's a joint effort, and Rotarians have been very anxious to accomplish this goal, supported financially, supported with advocacy to governments, and to support it with direct participation. So we feel that we've gotten a long way now. We've reduced the frequency of polio tremendously from 350,000 cases in 1988 to more like just a few hundred last year and even less now. So the goal is getting closer, and the number of countries involved is closer, and we want to continue this effort with the involvement and participation and the leadership which WHO can provide, along with the co-participation of the other donors and involved parties.
So, Dr. Joffrey, let's talk a little bit about the situation we face today. We have some really interesting things going on. So first off, in the April time frame, it looked like for a time that we really might have this thing nipped right there. I mean, there were weeks when the reporting infrastructure was signaling that there were no new cases. And it had been several weeks without any cases at one point by my tracking. Very exciting. But in the last several weeks, we've had a little surge in wild polio virus cases in Pakistan and Afghanistan. Not a big surge, just a little. We've had an outbreak of the circulating vaccine-derived polio in Madagascar. I heard this morning a rumor that there are some cases in Nigeria. Maybe you could comment on what the status is just right now, just what, on the ground, what's going on right now.
Okay, very good. So I think first let's talk about the eradication of wild polio virus. And just first say that there are three types of wild polio viruses, types 1, 2, and 3. Type 2 was last seen and eradicated in 1999, so it's been a really, really long time. And it's an important piece of fact to keep in mind when we come back to the vaccine-derived polio viruses. So that's first. We have not seen the wild polio virus type 3 since November of 2012. So we are coming up to almost 3 years without having detected any wild polio virus type 3. So we've been really dealing with wild polio virus type 1. And the progress against that has been very, very strong. As you know, that we have not detected a case of wild polio virus type 1 in Africa since August of last year. And this is truly unprecedented. We've never had this long interval without having detected a case of wild polio virus in Africa under a level of surveillance which is better than it has been ever before. We had a resurgence of polio in Pakistan last year, which also then affected Afghanistan, and that was quite a resurgence. Pakistan itself reported more than 85% of the global total last year, and for Pakistan itself, it was the largest number of cases in the previous 15 years. Now, there has been a real turnaround that you were referring to in Pakistan for a variety of reasons, and foremost amongst that is the government commitment. Of course, the role of Rotarians in Pakistan and globally mobilizing that commitment is key. We are starting to see a change. So by this time last year in Pakistan, the country had already reported more than 100 cases. So far this year, they've only reported 28, which is really only a quarter of the cases that they had reported the same time last year. What happened in Pakistan also affected adjoining Afghanistan. So a number of cases occurred in Afghanistan last year that were related to cases Pakistan. Afghanistan is also looking much better. They've reported 8 cases last year, same time this time last year, and now they have reported so far five cases. So Afghanistan is looking better, but certainly the major shift has been the progress we are seeing in Pakistan. Now, there's a big caveat in that, and that is that all of these data are coming from a time what we call low season for polio virus transmission. Polio is a seasonal disease. So the progress we've seen, and really much more improved access to children, much better coverage of children in Pakistan compared to last year. But we will really know how well that has gone once the high season comes around in the second half of the year. So what we've seen so far is a combination of the excellent program efforts, but also the season has helped. And we will really know the resilience of the progress, the strength of the progress when we are faced with the high transmission season. So back to you.
Well, we are just beginning to see a little bit of the impact of the high season starting to percolate in the data. Let's talk a little bit about Madagascar and what's going on there. I understand that there has been, if I'm reading the reports right, 8 cases of the circulating vaccine-derived polio virus. Dr. Jaffrey, tell us a little bit about what's going on there and what you'll be doing to stem that. And maybe you could address a nuance in this. Is the circulating vaccine-derived polio less virulent, less of a threat for some reason than the wild polio virus? Easier to stamp out or not?
Okay, no, those are all very good questions. So I think first it's important to understand what are vaccine-derived polio viruses and put it in the context of the utility of polio vaccines and then how they evolve and how does the program handle them, and then put them in the context of Madagascar. You know, the oral polio, and this is something I should sort of share this with you respectfully with Dr. Sever, because he's our teacher virologist. A lot of us have learned our virology from Dr. Sever. So with his permission, let me just try and attempt and explain this. The oral polio vaccine is actually made up of attenuated polio viruses. And these are viruses that have the ability to produce immunity, but they don't produce paralysis as often as the wild polio virus does. So this oral polio vaccine that we have been using in the eradication program right from the start, that Dr. Sever mentioned in 1979, has really been the mainstay of the eradication. Without this vaccine, we would not have made the progress and prevented 10 million cases of paralysis that we have because of this particular vaccine. So it's overall a very safe vaccine. It is the most effective vaccine that stops the transmission of polio virus. Now, what happens is that very rarely the live attenuated virus in the oral polio vaccine can, in certain conditions, begin to acquire ability to circulate, and then also acquire the ability to paralyze children. That happens very, very rarely, and much more rarely than, of course, the very sturdy and wild polio virus. But when it does paralyze children, clinically it is no different from what the wild polio virus does. of course, the experience of the program is that once these viruses emerge, they can be very readily controlled compared with how much effort it takes to control wild polio viruses. But in terms of producing clinical disease, once a vaccine-derived virus develops that ability, then clinically it is indistinct. Paralysis is cannot be differentiated from what the wild polio virus does. Now, the type of virus that most commonly evolves to become a vaccine-derived polio virus and starts to circulate is the type 2 polio virus. And so since the year 2000, once these circulating vaccine-derived polio viruses were first observed real time in the program, 90% have been due to the type 2 polio virus. And as I mentioned earlier, that this is the virus that we actually eradicated 15 years ago. Okay, so we've been using this vaccine while the disease that we are trying to, or the virus we are trying to get rid of, has already been gone. So that's why one of the strategies to complete polio eradication is, in fact, the phased removal of these Sabin viruses from the polio vaccine, starting with the type 2. And the plan is to remove this vaccine from the immunization programs around the world in April 2016. Now, what is happening in Madagascar is it's not the type 2 vaccine-derived polio virus. In fact, it's the more rare form of the type 1 circulating vaccine-derived polio virus. And let me just say that in what conditions do these viruses emerge and begin to circulate? And basically, simply put, is that when vaccination with oral polio vaccine continues, but at very low levels of coverage, so that you're not producing enough immunity in the population of children, so that these live viruses find an opportunity to travel from one child to another and then to next child and can begin to circulate, because there isn't enough level of immunity because of vaccination. So we have only seen circulating vaccine-derived polio viruses, whether type 1 or immunization coverage in an area is very, very low. So the solution also is by increasing immunization coverage. And in fact, that is what is happening in Madagascar right now. Mass vaccination campaigns with oral polio vaccine are now planned, starting the campaign. They've already done 2 rounds, but they're now going to do a rapid succession of 3 additional nationwide campaigns with oral polio vaccine starting on 4th of August. So I hand it back to you, and let me see if I've been clear about vaccine-derived viruses.
Well, that's very, very helpful, Dr. Jaffrey. Dr. Sever, I wonder if you would talk a little bit about this transition that the world needs to go through, and tell us what the plan is. But it seems to me that there is a transition from the trivalent vaccine that immunizes children against it's an oral vaccine that immunizes children against all 3 types of polio, to a bivalent vaccine that doesn't have the type 2, which would then seem to eliminate the risk of the circulating vaccine-derived polio of type 2, because that's the only type 2 that circulates. And then maybe a transition to the inactivated, the IPV vaccine, which is a shot and significantly more difficult to administer. Talk a little bit about those transition plans for kind of putting the nail in the coffin of polio here.
Yes, well, the transition actually starts and has started this year with the first phase, which is the addition of the killed vaccine to the immunization schedule. So currently, trivalent vaccine, oral polio vaccine, plus killed vaccine, with the idea of being sure to provide broad protection against all 3 types. The next move was called a switch, which would occur in April of next year, 2016, from the trivalent to the bivalent. But as you see, you would also still have that killed vaccine being given and protecting against all three types, including the type 2, which might potentially be around. But then the move then is away and to stay just with type 1 and 3 in the vaccine, with the idea of eventually switching probably to a all-kill vaccine for a period of time. So it's to move away from the vaccine which produces the vaccine-associated polio, but to take the precaution of adding killed vaccine in the package in order to make protection for all three viruses.
So in the developing world, it seems to be somewhat more challenging, and Dr. Joffrey, maybe you can comment on this, but it seems a little bit more challenging to use the IPV, even though it seems to be more effective at this stage of the game because it doesn't have any risk of creating the circulating vaccine-derived poliovirus. Can you comment on that tension between the need for IPV and the convenience of OPV, or am I creating a false dichotomy here? Comment on that if you would.
I think this dichotomy was prevalent in the world of vaccinology for decades, and I think our experience in the polio program, particularly in the final stages, is that we need both vaccines, and both vaccines are very, very good. As I was saying earlier, we would not have been able to make the progress against wild poliovirus or against any circulating poliovirus if it isn't for the oral polio vaccine. The killed vaccine is very good, what we call the inactivated polio vaccine. It's very good at protecting individuals. Who gets vaccinated gets protected, but that individual can get infected the virus to other individuals. What the oral vaccine does, it not only protects the individual, it also induces immunity in the human gut, which then also protects against community transmission. So this vaccine not only provides individual protection, it also provides community protection. So this is the vaccine without which we cannot stop circulation of the polio virus. So what we are now doing is that why we need both of these vaccines are for two important reasons. One is that as we are withdrawing the type 2 component in the oral polio vaccine, we don't want to leave the world's children vulnerable to type 2 poliovirus in case there is a laboratory accident or if it comes back for some other leak from a facility that's holding that virus. We don't want to leave the children of the world vulnerable to that type. That's why we are giving children IPV. But we are not trying to stop the transmission of type 2 virus because it's already gone, it's eradicated. Okay, that's why we don't need the oral variety of that particular serotype. That's why we need the IPV. There's another important reason why what we have learned is the role of IPV. With recent studies done in India and then now more recently in Pakistan, we've learned is that when you use the kill vaccine or the IPV, inactivated polio vaccine, among children who have previously received the oral vaccine, you get a much stronger effect than giving either another dose of IPV or another dose of OPV. So the combination is actually very, very potent. So now in the final stages of eradication, both in Nigeria and Pakistan, in fact, IPV is being given in key hard-to-reach communities together with OPV to finish off the final chains of poliovirus transmission. Back to you.
Now, I think what I've begun to see among Rotarians, and I'm a member of Rotary. I hang out with a lot of Rotarians, and I'm beginning to hear a few begin to grumble that we've got this done and that Rotary should abandon the effort and leave it to the World Health Organization and others and move on to another problem. Dr. Joffrey, how do you react to someone who might take that position?
Well, I mean, I think that would be, let me just first step back and really acknowledge and appreciate the role of Rotary International and Rotarians around the world for getting this whole eradication effort started and staying at the forefront and at the center of this effort. They've been an inspiration and a binding force for all the partners, but they've played a critical role not only as providing funding for the programs, but being very strong advocates. They've been the voice of civil society. We could not have succeeded, for example, in India without the strong leadership and supportive role of Rotarians in India. Rotarians are continuing to play an important role in other countries that are still struggling with polio. So I think this is the time when we are really looking to the end of polio. This is the first time we've been at a midpoint in a calendar year with only 33 cases of wild polio virus reported in the world. This is unprecedented. This is not the time to walk away from a winning program, and Rotary is going to be key to the success of the program. So I can't even begin to imagine that why one would even consider at this stage that Rotary and Rotarians should walk away. I mean, they have led a very, very successful program. And ultimately, it's not about polio, it's about polio plus as well. The broader benefits that polio eradication has brought, whether it's for reducing hundreds of thousands of deaths due to measles every year around the world, whether it's the strengthening of the routine immunization program, whether it is the emergency response, the most recent example being Ebola in West Africa. Polio eradication has brought so many broader benefits, and its legacy is so promising. And so the investment of Rotary and Rotary International is not only a polio-free world, which is big enough, which is historical in itself, but is also the legacy and broader benefits of polio eradication. So I would think that would be not wise at all. And I spoke to 15,000 Rotarians just last month in Sao Paulo, and I tell you that none of those 15,000 Rotarians were saying to me that we are having second thoughts about that program. The level of excitement on progress in that room was palpable. So just back to you. I would also just maybe one word of caution as well. If we give up on this program at this stage, poverty affected children in the world, and do we want to carry that with us at this stage, where this is the only program that manages to reach some of the most hardest to reach populations in the world, whether conflict, whether social isolation, political isolation? Polio vaccines are reaching to these children. Is this the time to walk away from these children? Do we want to leave the world that in 10 years we are back to 200,000 cases of paralyzed children? I don't think Rotarians want to do that. So back to you.
Well, Dr. Jaffrey, thank you very much for that comment. I think it is important to keep the Rotary troops fired up. I wonder, Dr. Sever, if you have a comment on that you would want to share as we conclude our discussion this morning. Do you have any thoughts about whether Rotary should continue to make this a priority?
Well, this has been the key priority for Rotary for the last 30 years, as you know, and we need to finish the job now. It's not the time to back away and hope that somebody else might be able to do the job. I think we have committed to provide financial support, $35 million a year for the next years, and we have to continue that in order to help the program reach the goal of eradication, so that we will no longer have polio and children will not have to experience this disease. So this is a great opportunity, but we must reach the finish line. We're at the 10-yard line, maybe the 5-yard line, but we have to get across the goal line. And that's not the time to give up the game.
Fantastic. Well, I want to thank both of you for the time that you've taken today to be with us. It's been a very helpful discussion for me. I hope all that who have watched it have enjoyed getting into the weeds a little bit. For those who really follow the work of Rotary and the World Health Organization and their partners in polio eradication, there are a lot of questions about how we will actually go about eradicating this disease in these final stages, and you've really addressed, I think, all of the key questions today, and so I thank you for that, for helping to clarify how we get from 1 case a week to 0 cases a week in the coming months. So we look forward to tracking your continued progress. Perhaps, Dr. Joffrey, you could take just a minute and tell people how they can learn more about the polio eradication effort online.
Yes, absolutely. I'm happy to do that. I think, of course, Rotary has their website, Rotary International, so a lot of information on polio is available on the Rotary International website. Of course, the WHO website also has information on polio, and then there is one website which is polioeradication.org. that has the most up-to-date and a vast compendium of material on polio eradication that you can find. I would also not stop here just about finding out more about polio. I think each of you has a role to play in ensuring that polio eradication is done. How you educate your communities, how do you educate and mobilize your political leaders to provide support and financing for the program at these final stages, and particularly Rotarians mobilizing their Rotary clubs in support of these final stages of polio eradication. Let's finish polio now. Thank you.
Very good. Dr. Sever, anything you would add to that?
No, let's keep up and get this job done.
All righty. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time today, and let me wish you continued success in your efforts to eradicate polio.
Thank you.
All righty.
Thank you.
Let's do some good.
Thank you.